All right. This is a blog, an audio blog that I am starting. Today is December 1st, 2017. For the sake of privacy and anonymity, I will not be revealing my name or my face or where I live. Simply tell you that I live in the western half of the United States. I was born here in the United States in the 1980s, during which it was pretty much customary that all newborn baby boys were circumcised. I'm going to go into a bit of depth on this later on. So for me to be left intact at being born at that period of time, it was very rare. As a result of this, I grew up completely unaware of the fact that this is pretty much normal throughout the rest of the country. I did not see another intact penis, another uncircumcised penis, until I was in my mid-20s. I'm the only person in my age range that I know personally who is intact. And I was unaware that the foreskin is supposed to become retractable. This was due to the fact that, as I said, the people in my age range and people, my parents and pretty much everybody. I mean, the circumcision rate in the United States when I was born was, if I remember correctly, I think it was around 75 to 80%, if not a little higher. It peaked in the 1970s when it was close to 90%. Peaked in the mid-1960s when it was close to 90%, and then it began to decline shortly thereafter that. Another reason I was unaware that the foreskin was supposed to retract is that most of the pornography that is produced in America uses American actors, and as a result, most of the penises that are in American porn are circumcised. And so, with the advent of the internet, I slowly began to realize that the way mine was is not the way it's supposed to work. Once I became aware that this was actually a problem, I was in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s, when I realized that, hold on a second, there's more to this thing than I realized. This is not supposed to be like this all the time. I was a little nervous to speak up and say anything. So I got on the internet and I did a little searching around, and I found that there were other people, other American men who had this problem, and one of the most commonly suggested remedies was stretching. Basically what you do is you pull the foreskin back as far as it will naturally retract, and then you continue pulling until you feel resistance. You don't want to pull to the point that you feel pain. And while this did not cure the problem completely, it did help in some regards. It was when I realized that it wasn't going to fix it entirely that I finally spoke up, and I talked to my dad, who was a doctor. He's retired now. And I said, look, this is embarrassing, but we need to do something about this. So we set up an appointment with a local urologist, and he took a look, and I went in believing that this could be I didn't believe that there would be any need for anything drastic. And very first thing he did was suggest full circumcision. And that, there's really no other word for it. It frightened me. It frightened me to the point that, I would have been 23 at the time. Yeah, 23. And it frightened me enough that I didn't speak up on the matter. I didn't seek any additional medical assistance or medical advice for another 5 years. Now, I don't want to go into this and start rambling, so I'm going to make this as quick and concise as I possibly can. For me, being an intact man in a society where that is far from the norm is for lack of a better term, it makes you feel special. Not necessarily better. I don't think I'm better than anyone else. Because if you'll pardon the pun, that's kind of a dick thing to say or feel, especially when you're talking about that. But, by the time I realized that my penis was not working the way nature intended it to, 25 years. Well, 25 years. And for lack of a better term, I'd become attached. And this was just the way it was. And the idea of losing that, unless I absolutely had to, was not an appealing prospect. You wouldn't want to take a present and throw it out before you've unwrapped it, and I'll get into what I mean by that in a minute here. Additionally, I do not agree with routinely circumcising infants. It's actually the thing I feel the strongest about, despite this issue I've had. But that being said, doing it shortly after birth, while there are complications, having it done as an adult is a whole nother ballgame. Being circumcised as an adult knocks you on your ass for a solid week. It requires general anesthesia, painful erections, things like that, and it's a full 6 to 8 weeks of healing before you can resume normal sexual activity, whatever that might be in your world. So I began looking into alternatives and learned that my condition is what is known as Frenulum breve. I'm going to spell that out for you. It's Frenulum space BREVE. And basically, in Latin, that translates to little bowstring. Now, for you circumcised men and you women out there in the audience who may not have encountered an intact penis, what the frenulum is a band of skin that attaches the foreskin to the base of the penis. And what this does is, what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to control the movement, and in some cases, some men find that area very pleasurable. And there is a similar structure at work on the base of your tongue. Same thing, it's called a frenulum. You may hear of children who get tongue-tied. They have a hard time speaking. Same exact thing. Frenulum is too short. And what's kind of ironic is that in my case, there I have no frenulum under my tongue at all. I guess it all went downstairs, if you know what I mean. So, I began to look into this condition, and the alternatives that might be out there to release the tightness that I feel in my frenulum while preserving it. Now, one of these was frenuloplasty, and it seemed to me the most viable and sensible option. Excuse me. Now, I know a lot of guys out there, and I've had men say this to me, well, why don't you just get circumcised? And, I considered it for about 8 seconds. It's just not something I'm interested in. And, if you guys out there are car guys, if you relate the foreskin to a supercharger on a big engine, and the frenulum is the belt that runs that supercharger. If the belt is too short, you don't get rid of the supercharger. You just get a longer belt. So I found quite a bit of information on this. Pretty much all of the websites and doctors that I found who, one, knew what this procedure was and were willing to do it were European. UK, France, Belgium, Germany. I think I found one in Japan too. Obviously, these were all entirely out of the question. Simply too far to travel for a penis. I was only able to find one doctor in the United States who advertised his services for frenuloplasty on the web. I was able to find another, but he's no longer. I found him once. I can't find him again. So the doctor I found is a man named Dr. Francois Eid, spelled E-I-D. He's in New York City. And I went to see him several weeks ago and really, really liked what he had to say. He made me feel at ease. And right now, we've got the date, so we've got the cost for all of this set up. And the only thing that stands in the way at this point in time is me trying to get time off work. Trying to get time off work around the holidays, New Year's can be kind of tricky. But anyway, what frenuloplasty does is it takes the frenulum, again, at the base of the penis, they cut it, and then they stitch it on further down, and then they stitch it in such a way that it basically gets longer. The procedure only takes, I think he said, about half an hour. Recovery time is a week to 2 weeks. They suggest a full 2 weeks, maybe a little longer before you resume sexual activity. But despite that, it is, in my mind, a far more appealing alternative to a full circumcision. I'll be able to get back on a plane the day after and fly home, and I should be back at work the very next day with only very minor discomfort here and there. So looking forward, I'm excited and I'm nervous, simply because this is something that not really everybody wants to put up with. It's not, getting any sort of work done down there is not pleasant. But despite that, I do feel that there are positives to this, things to look forward to. Increased pleasure, obviously, increased range of motion, and an increase in confidence. So I'm going to try to not make these any longer than 15 minutes. I can see right now that I'm cracking up on 15 minutes, and I just kind of hit the end of my notes here for this part one. But what you can expect over the next few months, right now our tentative surgery date is, I think, middle of January. I'm going to be updating this, let's see here, at minimum of 4 more times. Chapter 2 is going to be 24 hours, give or take, post-op. It'll all depend on when I get home, how I feel, and if I can get away and find a quiet enough place to record this without being interrupted. So 24 hours post-op will be the next installment. Chapter 3 will be 1 week post-op. Chapter 4 will be 2 weeks post-op. And I'm going to continue talking about the physical healing and the way I'm feeling. I may or may not include photos for those out there who are curious about this. It's not a widely covered subject, and I think light needs to be cast upon it. I think more people need to know. And then chapter 5 will be a month or 2 post-op. I'm going to pretty much do that whenever I'm feeling back to being me again. And then we'll wrap it up with a call to my fellow Americans. That will come later. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed listening to this. It's not fun to discuss these sorts of things, but I am putting myself out here in the hopes that it will be helpful to at least a few people, especially those in the U.S. who believe they may not have any choices or have been coerced into being circumcised when they don't want to be. So, until next time, I hope everyone has a fantastic holiday season, and talk to you after this is all done.